I wasn't planning to adopt a dog that day. Actually, I wasn't planning to adopt anything. Not a pet. Not a plant. Not even a plan for what I was supposed to do next. I had driven out to the shelter because my sister, Shelley, said I needed to get out of the house and do something that didn't involve pajamas or tissues. She said, just go look. Walk around. You don't have to bring anything home. But there was something in her voice, that knowing, gentle tone, that told me she thought I would. And honestly, I think a small part of me already knew, too. The shelter was about 20 minutes outside of town, tucked between open fields and quiet roads. It looked more like a barn than anything else, with faded red siding and a hand-painted sign that read, Hearts and Paws, Adopt, Don't Shop. The parking lot was empty except for a silver truck and a rusty Honda. I sat in my car for a few minutes, staring at the entrance. I didn't want a dog. I just didn't want to feel nothing anymore. Inside, it smelled like sawdust and shampoo. A friendly woman with short hair and a name tag that read Lisa greeted me at the front. First time here? She asked. I nodded. Take your time. All the pens are marked. If someone jumps on the fence, just ignore them. It's the quiet ones who surprise you. She winked and handed me a brochure. The kennels were arranged in a large circle. Some dogs barked the second I walked in. Others leapt at the metal grates, their tails wagging furiously. A little terrier mix flipped upside down trying to lick my fingers through the bars. They were all sweet. But I didn't feel it. That click. The thing people always talked about when they said they'd just known. I walked halfway through the building, then paused in front of a large pen tucked in the back corner. It was quiet. Too quiet. There, lying in the farthest shadow of the enclosure, was a dog that didn't move when I approached. He didn't bark. Didn't wag his tail. Didn't even lift his head. Hey, buddy, I whispered. He was big. Maybe 70, 80 pounds. Thick fur, golden brown with darker patches along his back. His ears hung slightly crooked, and one of his paws had a pale scar just above the dew claw. His eyes, the only thing he moved, followed me. But he didn't get up. Didn't beg. Didn't try. I looked at the card clipped to the gate. Name, bear age, 5 years breed, mixed, golden retriever plus. Temperament, gentle, reserved, notes, good with women. Needs quiet home. May take time to bond. I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I opened the latch and stepped inside. He still didn't move. Just saying hi, I murmured. I won't stay long. There was a bench on the side wall. I walked over, slow and cautious, and sat down. And that's when it happened. Bear stood. Like a switch had flipped. He took 3 large steps across the enclosure, ears up, eyes locked on mine, and before I could even think about moving, he lunged. I gasped, instinctively throwing my arms up. But there were no teeth. No growl. Just fur. Warm, heavy fur crashing into me like a soft avalanche. He climbed into my lap, all 70-something pounds of him, and buried his head into the crook of my neck. His entire body wiggled with joy. Tail wagging so fast it smacked the side of the bench. Nose nuzzling my chin. Tongue swiping at my jawline. I laughed. Actually laughed, the first real sound to come out of me in weeks. You sneaky little liar, I whispered, trying not to cry. You were just waiting for me to sit. Bear licked the side of my face in response. Lisa walked by a few seconds later, then doubled back when she saw us. Well, I'll be, she muttered, stepping closer. That's a first. What is? I asked, still half crushed under Bear's full body cuddle. He's been here 6 months, she said gently. Never moves for anyone. We almost stopped showing him to people. Said maybe he was just too shut down. I looked down at him. He looked up at me. I sat down, I said. Lisa smiled. And he attacked. Yeah. Don't worry, she added with a wink. He only attacks with love. We sat there for a long time. I scratched behind his ears. He snorted softly and leaned his full weight against my side like a furry heating pad with opinions. I didn't even notice the time passing. Lisa came back around and said softly, "Take your time. When you're ready, we'll start the paperwork." And just like that, I wasn't just looking anymore. Back at home, Bear explored the apartment with slow, deliberate steps. He sniffed every corner, paused by every doorway, and finally curled up in the corner near the bookshelf, not on the couch, not on the dog bed I'd picked out. He just watched me. Not nervously. Not possessively. Like he was trying to figure me out. I unpacked the last of the adoption papers and sat cross-legged on the floor. He was across the room, silent. Still. I felt it again, that hollowness in my chest, that echo where something used to be. And without a sound, Bear stood up. Walked over. Waited until I had fully sat down. Then attacked again, gently, slowly, this time with just enough pressure to tip me backward as he curled half on top of me, his head tucked under my arm. I didn't say anything. I didn't cry. But I let the tears come anyway. And Bear stayed right there, breathing slow and deep, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment all along. He didn't bark. Not once. Not that first night, not the next morning, not even when the mail carrier knocked a little too hard on the door. Bear was quiet in a way that didn't feel shy, it felt deliberate. Like he didn't need to make noise to make his presence known. He just was. Solid. Still. Watching. Always watching. The first few days with him were strange, in the most gentle way. He didn't pace or whine when I left a room. He didn't follow me like a shadow or seek my attention. But every time I stopped moving. When I sat on the couch, sank onto the porch steps, dropped into a chair with my head in my hands, Bear would come. Not instantly. Not eagerly. But steadily. And he'd settle next to me, sometimes touching, sometimes not. Just there. A silent sentinel. A living weight that grounded me without saying a word. The first time I tested the pattern, it was on accident. I had just finished unpacking the last of the moving boxes in the living room. I dropped onto the couch with a sigh and pressed my palms into my eyes, trying to keep the wave of emptiness from rolling over me again. And then, soft steps. A pause. A warm nudge against my thigh. He didn't lick. Didn't push. Just rested his head against my leg like a quiet exhale. It was so intentional. So much more than just a dog looking for a pat. "Do you wait for me to sit down?" I whispered. Bear blinked at me. Tail thumped once. Then twice. And that was all the answer I needed. On the third night, I had a nightmare. I hadn't had one in weeks, not since before I left the city. But this one was sharp, a swirling mess of noise, grief, memories I'd tried to lock away in old voicemail folders and dusty shelves of my mind. My dad's voice. His laugh. Then the silence after the hospital. I woke up gasping, tears streaking down my face, the room still dark around me. And there, already pressed against the side of the bed, was Bear. His eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, ears tilted, head low. Waiting. I reached down. He stepped closer. And instead of lying at the foot of the bed, like usual, he jumped up, slow and careful, and curled against my side, warm and breathing steady. No words. Just wait. Just here. The next morning, I made a decision. I canceled my therapy appointment. Not because I didn't believe in therapy, I did. I do. But because I needed space to listen to myself for a little while. Bear wasn't a replacement for help. But he was helping me remember what it felt like to be still. To be safe. To not be questioned or analyzed or hurried toward a conclusion I wasn't ready for. He wasn't asking me to explain my sadness. He was just showing me how to sit with it. By the end of the week, I'd stopped trying to define our routine. Bear didn't like toys. Didn't chase balls. Didn't do tricks. But he had his own rituals. He waited at the bathroom door while I showered. Not scratching. Not whining. Just there. He lay by the window in the mornings while I drank my coffee in silence. And, most curiously, he only approached me when I was still. Never when I stood. Never when I called him. Only when I'd settled, surrendered, even just for a moment, did he come. And I started to understand, he wasn't just reacting. He was reading me. I called Shelley on a quiet Thursday evening, Bear curled at my feet while I sat on the porch with a blanket and a mug of tea. She picked up on the second ring. "Well?" she asked. I smiled. "You were right. About the dog or about needing to wear pants again?" "Both," I said, laughing softly. She paused. "How's he doing?" "He's quiet. Weirdly quiet." "That's not bad." "No, it's not. He's observant. Like he knows when I need him. But not in a clingy way. Just present." She was quiet for a moment. "Sounds like you needed that." I did. We talked for a while, about normal things. The kind of things I hadn't been able to talk about for months without feeling like I was pretending. But this time it didn't feel like pretending. It felt like healing. Slow. Honest. Real. That night, after I hung up, I stayed sitting outside longer than usual. Bear lay beside me, eyes closed, ears still twitching every now and then at the night sounds. A moth bounced against the porch light. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. But Bear didn't move. Didn't tense. He just breathed, slow and steady. Like he knew this moment was safe. And I realized something I hadn't before. He wasn't just waiting until I sat down. He was waiting until I let go. Until I stopped holding my breath. Until I surrendered the armor I wore in every moment of motion, the armor of busyness, distraction, false cheer. He waited for the version of me that was real. Raw. And then he came. Every time. Like clockwork. Like he'd been trained for it. Or, like he knew what it was like to feel that way himself. The next day, I found an old envelope tucked in the bottom of Bear's adoption folder. It wasn't addressed to anyone. Just a tiny scrap of folded paper with a phone number and a name. D. Wallace, Maple Hollow, Route 6. It hadn't meant anything when I first glanced through the paperwork at the shelter. But now? Now I felt something flicker in my gut. Who was D. Wallace? And how had Bear learned to love so precisely? So patiently? I stared at the paper for a long time. Bear watched me from across the room. Then, when I finally sat down at the kitchen table, he stood. Walked over. And laid his head in my lap. Like he knew exactly what I was about to do. Like he wanted to be close for whatever I might find out next. The road out to Maple Hollow was long and curved like a river. It wove through wooded hills and sleepy farmland, past rusted mailboxes and old pickup trucks that hadn't moved in months. It felt like the kind of place where people lived quietly, and stayed even quieter. I hadn't told anyone I was driving out there, not Shelley, not even the shelter. Just Bear, sitting in the passenger seat beside me, head resting on the edge of the window, ears perked at the wind. He hadn't flinched when I held up the note. Hadn't wagged his tail. Hadn't reacted much at all. But the moment I picked up the car keys and grabbed my coat, he followed without hesitation. Like he knew where we were going. Or maybe, who we were going to find. I pulled into a gravel driveway with a faded wooden sign out front that read, Wallace, Route 6. The house beyond it was small, old but well kept. White paint, green shutters, and a wide porch with hanging plants still blooming despite the late autumn chill. I sat in the car for a few seconds, heart thudding against my ribs. This was a dumb idea. I didn't even know what I was looking for. But Bear turned his head and looked at me. Not wagging. Not whining. Just waiting. Like always. The door was opened by a woman in her 70s, her gray hair tied back into a loose braid, her eyes sharp as winter sky. She looked me over quickly, then her eyes dropped to Bear. And her breath caught. "Oh," she whispered. I stepped forward slowly. I'm sorry for the surprise. My name is Ellie. I adopted him, Bear, from a shelter 3 weeks ago. I found this in his adoption folder. I handed her the small note. She didn't read it. Didn't need to. Her gaze stayed on Bear, wide and wet now, hands trembling slightly as she reached out, palm up. "Come here, baby," she said. Bear stepped forward, slow and cautious, sniffed her hand. And then pressed his head into her chest. Like he remembered her. She dropped to her knees on the porch, arms wrapped tight around his thick neck, burying her face in his fur. "I thought they took you somewhere far," she whispered, her voice cracking. "They told me you were gone. That no one came." I knelt beside them. "Who was he?" She looked up at me. "My son. His name was Thomas Wallace. He had been 3-4 Army vet, struggled with PTSD, lived here after the war, quiet, reclusive, just him and Bear. He got Bear from a stray rescue group upstate," she said. "Wasn't even planning to. He just walked in one day, and Bear walked straight up to him. Saturday. Didn't move." I swallowed hard. She smiled softly. "He always said Bear didn't bark because he didn't need to. Said Bear listened better than any person ever did." "What happened?" I asked gently. Her voice turned hollow. "Thomas passed away in his sleep. Heart condition no one knew about. I found him 2 days later." I didn't speak. Didn't breathe. "He was on the couch," she continued, "and Bear was lying at his feet. He wouldn't let the paramedics near the body. He didn't growl, but he wouldn't leave. They had to coax him out with treats." Her hands trembled again. "After that, he waited on the porch. 4 days. Weeks. Refused to eat unless someone sat beside him. He only moved when someone Saturday." I blinked, feeling the pieces fall together in slow, aching sequence. "So he stayed with Thomas until the end." She nodded. "And then waited for someone to sit before he trusted again." Bear leaned into her now, eyes half closed. "He's been waiting for you," she whispered. I swallowed around the lump in my throat. "What makes you think that?" She looked at me. "Because he chose you. Just like he chose Thomas. You sat, and he knew. We stayed on the porch for hours." She brought out tea in mismatched mugs and old photos in cracked leather albums. Bear lay curled at our feet, his body relaxed in a way I hadn't seen before. Like this visit filled a quiet space inside him that had been hollow since the day Thomas left. The photos showed a younger Bear, slightly leaner, same crooked ears, resting at Thomas's side, running through tall grass, sitting stoically as Thomas stared into the horizon like he was waiting for something only he and Bear could see. "He used to say Bear was his anchor," she said. I nodded slowly. "He's been that for me too." She smiled again, a little sad this time. "He doesn't jump for just anyone. Doesn't snuggle. Doesn't demand. He waits. He watches. He sees people who are slipping, and he grounds them." Tears stung my eyes. "He attacked me with love the first time I sat down," I said softly. "And now I know why." I left with a photo, a copy she gave me from the album. It was Bear and Thomas on the porch, Thomas reading a book, Bear's head in his lap. On the back she had written in faded ink, "Stillness is where love finds its voice." The drive home felt quieter. But not lonely. Bear rested his head on my thigh as I drove, something he hadn't done before. It was new. Intimate. A kind of trust built not through commands or treats but through memory and presence. I reached down and gently ran my fingers over his head. "Thank you for choosing me," I whispered. His tail thumped once. Back home, I framed the photo and placed it by the window, right where Bear liked to rest in the morning. I didn't cry that night. Not because I wasn't sad, but because the sadness had changed. It wasn't hollow anymore. It was rooted. And Bear had planted it there, not to break me, but to help me grow something new. That weekend, Shelley came to visit. She walked in, arms full of groceries, and stopped short when she saw the photo. "Who's that?" she asked. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, then walked over and placed her hand gently on Bear's head. "I knew there was something special about you," she murmured. Bear leaned into her touch for a moment, then padded over to me. I had just sat down on the couch. And, of course, he waited for me to settle. Then attacked. With love. Like always. Grief has a way of pretending it's finished. It goes quiet. Lets you breathe again. Lets you cook, laugh, meet people for coffee. Lets you think maybe, just maybe, it's gone. But then it knocks on the door you forgot to lock. And walks right back in. It happened on a Tuesday. The kind of gray, forgettable Tuesday that tries to pass as ordinary. The mail had been late. My coffee was cold. The wind kept knocking the porch plants over. Bear had nudged my hand all morning, subtly, like he knew something was off before I did. And then I saw the envelope. I almost didn't open it. It was buried under an electric bill and a supermarket flyer. But the handwriting on the front was familiar. Too familiar. Curved. Slanted. Certain. My father's. I stared at it for a long time. It had been 2 years since we last spoke. And 3 months since he passed away. I hadn't gone to the funeral. Couldn't. Not after everything. Not after what he said before he left. But the envelope in my hand had been forwarded twice, redirected from my old address. The postmark was from months ago. He must have sent it before. I opened it with shaking fingers. Just a single page. Short. No return address. No apology. "Ellie. I don't expect forgiveness. But I hope, someday, you'll see that I was just afraid. Of you. Of myself. Of what it meant to love someone and still fail them. I hope you have peace now. Love, Dad." I dropped the letter on the kitchen floor like it had burned me. The walls of the room blurred. The ceiling warped. My legs buckled beneath me and I sank to the floor, hands trembling, vision swimming with years of ache and anger and the worst emotion of all. The possibility that I'd been wrong. That I should have reached out. That I'd waited too long. I didn't cry right away. I sat there, back against the cabinet, staring at the linoleum floor like it could explain something I hadn't understood for years. Then I saw the pause. Bear stood in front of me. Head. Man from Maple Hollow, Thomas's mother, kneeling on the porch with her arms around Bear's neck. He waited on the porch for someone to sit, she'd said. He only trusted stillness. And I finally understood. He didn't wait for me to sit down because he needed attention. He waited because that's when I was most me. When the performance ended. When the walls fell. When I wasn't hiding behind movement and noise and pretending to be fine. He waited, for truth. And then, he gave love. That night, I left the letter on the counter. I didn't burn it. Didn't hide it. Just let it exist. Bear watched me from the hallway, his head cocked slightly. "You knew," I whispered. "You felt it coming." He stepped into the room, sat near the couch, and looked at me the way he always did. Not asking. Just waiting. I sat down. And he came forward, climbing halfway onto the couch, not the whole thing, just enough so I could feel his weight against my side. And he sighed. That deep, warm, gentle exhale of peace. I didn't sleep much that night, but I didn't feel alone. For the first time since my dad's voice vanished from my world, I didn't feel like I had to carry the grief alone either. Because Bear was carrying part of it with me. Over the next few days, I stayed quiet. I canceled dinner with Shelley. Turned off my phone. Let the dishes pile up. Bear stayed close, eating only after I did, following me not with excitement but with intention. He seemed to know which rooms I needed him in, and when I needed to be left alone, just for a while. But every time I sat, whether on the porch, the bed, or the floor, he came. Soft. Steady. Present. It was late Saturday afternoon when Shelley finally showed up. I hadn't answered her messages in days, and she'd had enough. She knocked twice, then let herself in with the spare key. I was curled on the floor, the letter from my dad open beside me, Bear's head in my lap. She didn't speak for a full minute. Then she just sat beside me. And reached out to stroke Bear's fur. "He's still choosing you," she whispered. I nodded. Tears slipped down my cheeks again, not from pain, this time. From recognition. From being seen. We sat there until the sun dipped below the trees. No big talk. No pressure. Just three living things learning how to sit with grief, together. After Shelley left, I made tea. Bear lay by the window, eyes half closed, ears twitching with every sound from the breeze outside. I stood beside the kitchen table, staring at the photo of Thomas and Bear, the one I'd framed. "Did you do this for him too?" I asked quietly. "Did you hold him when he broke?" Bear lifted his head. Walked to my side. And sat. I sank slowly into the chair. He waited, as always. Then leaned against my legs, his body pressing into mine like an anchor. "Yes," I whispered, running my hand along his neck. "You did." Later that night, I journaled again. For the first time in days. He doesn't chase me when I run from myself. He waits for me to come back. He doesn't interrupt my grief. He holds space for it. He knows that stillness isn't weakness, it's truth. And he never forces comfort, he waits, and then attacks with love, the kind that doesn't fix you, but reminds you you're already whole. Healing isn't loud. It's not a fireworks show or a dramatic declaration in the rain. Sometimes, it's a quiet morning when you make coffee without crying. Sometimes, it's going outside without checking who might be watching. Sometimes, it's realizing you haven't thought about the worst day in weeks. And sometimes, it's a dog, asleep at your feet, who no longer flinches when you stand up, because he trusts that you'll sit again. Eventually. It had been almost 2 months since I brought Bear home. 2 months of soft mornings and quiet nights. Of tears and letters and old grief peeled open like paint from a forgotten wall. Of learning to sit with myself, and letting someone else sit with me. Bear didn't jump on me anymore when I sat down. Not every time. Because he didn't need to. He knew I wasn't afraid of being still anymore. And that, I think, was the point. I started going out more. Not far, and not fast, but more. A bookstore on Tuesdays. Coffee with Shelley on Fridays. I started sketching again, something I hadn't done since before everything crumbled. Sometimes Bear would lie across my feet while I drew, his quiet breath syncing with my own. I'd sketch his paws. His tail. The soft curve of his brow. Always still. Always present. Then one morning, I got an email from the shelter. It was a group message, one of those hopeful updates with pictures of new arrivals and thank yous to recent adopters. I almost deleted it. But something about the subject line caught my eye. Still waiting, but worth it. I clicked. And there it was. A photo of a small black puppy, curled up in the corner of a kennel, looking almost invisible. Her name was Violet. The note beneath it read, "Violet has been with us for 6 weeks. She's gentle, shy, and afraid of loud noises. She hasn't approached anyone yet. But we believe she's just waiting for the right person to sit with her." My heart did something strange. It didn't hurt. But it tugged. That afternoon, I drove to the shelter. Not to adopt. Just to visit. I told myself that the moment I stepped out of the car. I wasn't there to take anyone home. Just to say hello. Just to see. Bear rode with me in the back seat, silent as ever, but his ears were alert, like he already knew. Lisa was still at the front desk when I walked in. She smiled the moment she saw me. Back for more? Just visiting, I said. Saw the email. She laughed softly. We were hoping you'd come. She led me toward the back kennels. They keep asking for Bear, by the way, she said. He's become a bit of a legend around here. Everyone loves his story. I smiled. He's everything. She stopped outside a kennel near the end of the row. And there she was. Violet. Small. Shadowy. Curled tightly into herself like she was trying to disappear. I knelt outside the gate. She didn't move. Didn't look up. Just breathed, slow and shallow. She hasn't let anyone touch her yet, Lisa whispered. I nodded. Then said, Can I sit inside? Lisa hesitated. Then unlocked the gate. Bear followed me in, calm and quiet, staying back as I crossed the space and slowly lowered myself to the ground. I didn't call Violet. Didn't reach for her. I just sat. The minutes passed. 1. 5. 10. I could hear the hum of the overhead lights, the distant bark of another dog. Bear lay down beside me with a quiet huff, eyes closing halfway. And then, slowly, like a shadow moving toward warmth, Violet turned her head. She looked at Bear first. Then at me. She didn't move. But her tail tapped once. See? I whispered. You're not invisible. Bear thumped his tail in response, like he agreed. But he didn't move toward her. He just waited. Watched. Like he knew this was her moment. Not his. I stayed for almost an hour. At some point, Violet crept halfway across the kennel, then stopped. Close enough that I could hear her breath. Her nose twitched as she sniffed the air around me. But she didn't touch me. And that was okay. Because she didn't need to. She was trying. On the way out, Lisa handed me a thank you card from the staff. Inside was a picture of Bear on his first day at the shelter, sitting in the very corner Violet had once claimed. Same body language. Same eyes. And beneath it, someone had written. Sometimes the quietest dogs have the loudest love. That night, I sat on the porch with Bear curled beside me. The air was cool and still. The stars were just beginning to shimmer. I sipped tea and scratched the soft fur behind his ears. You didn't rush her, I said. You let her come to us. Bear stretched and sighed. You knew I didn't need to save anyone, I continued. I just needed to be what someone else once was for me. He looked up, eyes soft, steady. And then, slowly, he stood. Walked around me. And sat, facing me now, not waiting for me to sit. But choosing. Again. And I laughed, a warm, full laugh that bubbled up from the center of my chest. You're not done with me, huh? He leaned forward. Placed one big paw on my knee. And then, attacked. Not with force. Not with chaos. But with full body affection. Licks. Wiggles. Headbutts. The same way he did the very first day we met. I fell backward onto the porch, giggling as his heavy body curled against mine, his tail thudding happily against the wood. And through the laughter, through the warmth pressing into my chest, I realized something beautiful. He still did it. He still waited for me to sit. Not because I was broken. But because he knew. That's when love lands the deepest. That's when we're open. That's when we're ready. He chose me again. And I would keep choosing him. For every sit. For every storm. For every quiet moment in between.